As the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 1924, America stood at the heart of the roaring Twenties, a nation buzzing with jazz rhythms and economic optimism after the shadows of World War I. President Calvin Coolidge, who had ascended to the White House following Warren G. Harding's sudden death the previous year, embodied this era's promise of prosperity and normalcy. Yet beneath the surface, 1924 would reveal deep tensions, scandals shaking trust in government, bold steps toward inclusion and exclusion, and whispers from abroad that echoed in American halls of power. The year opened with a cultural explosion that captured the spirit of innovation. On February 12th, in the Grand Aeolian Hall in New York City, composer George Gershwin unveiled his groundbreaking work, Rhapsody in Blue. Performed by Paul Whiteman's orchestra, this fusion of jazz and classical music stunned audiences, symbolizing America's vibrant artistic soul. It was a sound of the future, blending the raw energy of Harlem's speakeasies with the sophistication of concert halls, and it quickly became an anthem for a generation eager to dance away the war's lingering gloom. But not all notes in 1924's symphony were harmonious. The Teapot Dome scandal, a festering wound from Harding's administration, erupted into full view. Named after a Wyoming oil reserve, it involves Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall leasing federal lands to private companies in exchange for bribes. On February 18th, Secretary of the Navy Edwin Denby resigned amid the fallout, and by October 25th, Fall himself would become the first US cabinet member convicted of a felony. This betrayal eroded public faith in Washington, fueling calls for reform and reminding Americans that even in boom times, corruption lurked in the shadows of power. Across the Atlantic, events stirred ripples that reached American shores. On January 21st, Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Bolshevik Revolution, died at age 53 after a series of strokes. His passing unleashed a power struggle in the Soviet Union that would culminate in Joseph Stalin's rise, heightening American anxieties about communism. The Red Scare, already gripping the nation, intensified as labor unions and immigrants faced heightened scrutiny, with fears of red infiltration shaping domestic policies for years to come. In Europe, another figure emerged from obscurity. Adolf Hitler, whose failed beer hall putsch in Munich the previous November had landed him in prison, spent early 1924 dictating his manifesto, Mein Kampf. Though dismissed in the US press as the rantings of a fringe agitator, this event underscored the fragility of post-war Europe, a continent America had largely withdrawn from under isolationist banners. Yet economic ties bound the nations closer than politics admitted. April brought a flurry of American ingenuity. On April 17th, Metro Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures, and Louis B. Mayer's company merged to form Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM, birthing a Hollywood powerhouse that would dominate the silver screen for decades. Just a day later, on April 18th, Simon & Schuster published the world's first crossword puzzle book, igniting a craze that turned idle moments into mental workouts, and foreshadowed the puzzle's enduring place in American leisure. May deepened the year's contrasts. On May 2nd, Coolidge proclaimed Idaho's eerie lava fields as craters of the Moon National Monument, preserving a stark reminder of the nation's wild geological past amid its rush toward modernity. But horror struck Chicago on May 21st, when teenagers Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb kidnapped and murdered 14-year-old Bobby Franks in a twisted bid to prove their Nietzschean superiority. Their sensational trial, defended by famed attorney Clarence Darrow, gripped the nation, sparking debates on juvenile delinquency, wealth's corrupting influence, and the limits of intellect without morality. The month's pinnacle of policy came on May 26th, when Coolidge signed the Immigration Act of 1924. This law slashed quotas to favor Northern Europeans while barring most Asians entirely, capping annual entries at 164,000, a sharp turn from the open doors of prior decades. From America's vantage, It aimed to preserve cultural homogeneity and jobs during post-war adjustment, but it slammed shut opportunities for millions fleeing Europe's turmoil, reshaping the nation's demographic tapestry and echoing isolationist sentiments that prioritized domestic stability over global humanitarianism. June marked a turning point for inclusion at home and stability abroad. On June 2nd, the Indian Citizenship Act granted U.S. citizenship to all Native Americans born within the country's borders, a long overdue recognition after centuries of displacement. Though voting rights and land issues persisted, it symbolized a fragile step toward equity for the continent's first inhabitants. That same month, on June 15th, a young J. Edgar Hoover assumed directorship of the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, heralding an era of federal law enforcement that would expand dramatically in the decades ahead. Internationally, the Dawes Plan, unveiled on June 16th, offered a lifeline to war-torn Europe. Crafted by American banker Charles Dawes, it restructured Germany's crushing reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, tying payments to economic recovery and backed by US loans exceeding $200 million. For America, this wasn't altruism alone. It safeguarded investments in Europe, boosted exports, and averted a deeper global slump, allowing Wall Street to thrive while subtly extending US financial influence without military entanglement. The summer sizzled with athletic glory. From July 4 to 12, the Paris Summer Olympics showcased American dominance, as the US team hauled in 45 gold medals, more than the rest of the world combined. Swimmer Johnny Weissmuller, who shattered records earlier that year, added to his legend, later trading pools for Tarzan's vines on screen. These games, broadcast faintly via emerging radio waves, fueled national pride and the growing obsession with sports as a mirror of American vigor. Innovation accelerated through the warmer months. On June 15th, Ford Motor Company rolled out its 10 millionth automobile, a testament to Henry Ford's assembly line revolution that put wheels under the middle class and reshaped suburbs and highways. Radio, too, leaped forward. The Republican National Convention in Cleveland on June 10th became the first political gathering aired nationwide, shrinking distances and amplifying Coolidge's message of calm competence. Wyoming broke barriers in September when Nellie Taylor Ross was sworn in as the nation's first female governor, a quiet victory for women's suffrage just 4 years after the 19th Amendment. Her tenure championed education and banking reform, proving women's leadership could steer states through economic tides. October's Teapot Dome trials culminated in convictions, cleansing some stains from Harding's legacy while propelling Coolidge's image as the incorruptible Silent Cal. Meanwhile, aviation pushed boundaries. On August 16th, US Army pilots embarked on the first round-the-world flight, a grueling 175-day odyssey that tested endurance and heralded air power's strategic promise. November brought electoral vindication. On November 4th, Coolidge swept to victory over Democrat John W. Davis and progressive Robert La Follette, securing 54% of the vote in a landslide that affirmed Republican dominance and the allure of laissez-faire economics. Abroad, the US sidestepped the Geneva Protocol on Disarmament, underscoring its reluctance to bind itself to collective security. Cultural milestones capped the year. On November 27th, Macy's staged its inaugural Thanksgiving Day parade in New York, a flotsam balloon spectacle that blended commerce with holiday cheer, drawing crowds and cementing traditions still alive today. Walt Disney, ever the visionary, released his first fully independent cartoon, Alice's Wonderland, laying groundwork for an animation empire. And on December 29th, the National Broadcasting Company, NBC, launched as America's first major radio network, linking stations coast to coast and transforming entertainment into a shared national experience. As 1924 faded, America gazed ahead with a mix of triumph and trepidation. The year's innovations propelled progress, its scandals demanded vigilance, and its policies drew lines between inclusion and isolation. From jazz improvisations to quota walls, 19 and 24 encapsulated a nation forging its identity in a world still healing from war, prosperous yet precarious, inventive yet insular. It was a pivotal chapter in the American story, one whose echoes would resonate through the Jazz Age and beyond.